All right, hello everybody. I'm Eric Vansel,
I'm Daryl Sanders.
and we're your hosts for this show. So, big news this week. It looks like maybe, if the rumors are true, Harrison Ford might actually be returning to the Star Wars universe. The question, though,
Yeah, man.
is like what series, I mean, there's all kinds of weird little questions. Right off the bat, I would say that obviously it's either going to be The Mandalorian or The Book of Boba Fett. And the rumors are that he actually shot some de-aged footage or whatever, which obviously makes perfect sense, right? Considering this
hmm
is taking place right after Return of the Jedi, you can't have old Han. So, yeah, I mean, when you first heard about this, what were your thoughts?
Oh man, I'm excited. I mean, I definitely understand why Han Solo is one of your favorite characters. I mean, he's definitely one of mine. He definitely brings that comedic relief. That like you said, like we've always said, that swagger, that charisma, that like okay, look, I've got this kind of attitude.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm just really happy just to see Harrison Ford embracing Star Wars again. That's really been the thing, and it sucks that it's taken this long because honestly, I would have loved, and I was thinking about this earlier, is that I would have loved to, and maybe I don't know, where the sequels would have been different had this been taking place, let's say in the mid '90s or the late '90s. You know, and it was like, what kind of stuff would we have gotten if we had a younger Mark Hamill, a younger Carrie Fisher, a younger Harrison Ford? And I'm just thinking like, man, just the magic that could have happened if everybody, because those other two were on board for it. I mean, they didn't have any problems with it. It was just Harrison Ford didn't want to, play Han anymore. But
Well, I
for
think it
whatever
was
reason, he's kind of got that love back.
right, but I think it was a mixture because I agree. I always thought that it's too bad that they couldn't actually do the sequel trilogy in the 90s, or at the very least, maybe not too far after the prequel trilogy. Because remember, we didn't get the first prequel movie until, like, what, 99 or something. And then we got
99,
the
yep,
final
gotta
one in
remember.
'05. If they had started, I don't know, in '07, even like 5 years earlier. But I mean, I agree. I think that it would have been cool to actually have done the sequel trilogy first in the 90s and then maybe go ahead and do the prequels. That could have actually
Yeah, it's
certainly been interesting.
yeah, it's easier to go back because you can find characters who, to play a younger version of these
Right,
guys. But like,
right.
you know, to go forward though with the original cast, I mean, you kind of have to be fighting against time at that point. So, yeah, I would have
Yeah.
loved to have seen that.
It's ironic that we bring all this stuff up because I just got through last night for some odd reason, I don't know why, but I had this urge to watch The Rise of Skywalker again. And besides, of course, the problems with the pacing and all that stuff, which when you haven't seen it for a
hmm
while, you're just going like, man, this is really like glaring. I mean,
hmm
the problems that The Rise of Skywalker had were glaring, although I think that a couple of years removed from it, I'm a little bit more forgiving of the film now. Like I'm enjoying it a lot more from the standpoint of just enjoying the movie. But I was watching it last night and I remember thinking to myself, man, it's just too bad that they couldn't have done this a little bit earlier so Carrie Fisher could have done episode 9. Like for real, not
Yeah,
some crazy, CGI
yeah.
trick or whatever. But here's something that I wouldn't mind getting into with this. So we know that there's a lot of rumors. That's one of the reasons why I chose to do this today too, because as you know, you and I were going back and forth on a bunch of different things, and I should apologize off the bat too. We actually haven't been on in a while. Uh, we've skipped
Yeah.
like one or two Fridays, and I think we skipped a couple of our Mondays too, but I think we're back on track. So you can expect our Visions episode 8 review on Monday, and of course we're here today. But one of the things that we were going back and forth on was just all this news that's been coming out over the last like 4 or 5 days.
hmm
But this to me was the granddaddy of them all because this is actually true, and there's been more than one report. I mean, there was one report out there, and I'm like, oh, I don't know. I'm not gonna have us jump on that. There's other stories that are out there that are a little bit more, I don't know, accurate, true, corroborated,
Substantial. Yeah.
substantial, you know.
Mm.
But it was when there was a second and then third report on this where it started gaining a little bit of traction, and it makes sense that they would approach him. But here's a question, and this is what I want to get into a little bit, because I think that this could actually be an interesting direction for this discussion. And certainly anybody that's watching this, feel free to chat in, because I think that this is going to be a good discussion. And of course, we have been getting some good comments on a lot of our past shows. I actually go back and check a lot of our past shows, and our latest comment came a couple of days ago from an older show. So it's great that everybody out there is watching this stuff and still commenting on it. And feel free to keep doing that, because I check it all the time, and that's what it's all about, is discussion. But the discussion point that I wanted to go into is, I think it's odd. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy about it, but I think it's odd that they didn't choose Alden Ehrenreich to reprise his role as Han Solo for this.
Well, I think that would have been the case if Harrison Ford would have said no.
Probably.
But if you can get the, if you go to the well, why not?
Well, don't get me wrong, because there's a couple of reasons why I think that it's important that they do approach Harrison with this at first, because it would be different if this took place in between Solo and Episode 4. Then it would make sense for Alden to reprise his role. But the fact that this is post Return of the Jedi, and Harrison Ford was Han Solo during that time, and then of course he picks it up again for Episode 7. I mean, it totally makes sense that they do it, but it just fascinates me, though. And thank goodness for all this de-aging technology that they can do. Because, otherwise,
and that's what I'm saying. I'm really curious to see how they do this and how they handle it. Of course, I don't think that, he's going to have such a monumentous, it's like, I don't think he's going to be like a lead character or anything,
Right,
you know what
right.
I'm saying? But I think that it's kind of have that whole, because even looking at Mark Hamill, right? Okay, that was really cool to see Mark Hamill, de-age for the end of the Mandalorian season 2. But the thing is that you can still kind of tell it was computer generated, and that was just like last year. So granted, I'm sure
So they found that guy that did that really good job, and they hired him on the spot. Hopefully they get that guy to do the Harrison Ford one.
Well, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, see, I could see if you took Alden Ehrenreich and Harrison Ford, and you kind of like de-aged him on Alden Ehrenreich. I can kind of see that working, in a way.
They did
who
that.
knows?
That might be somebody
the case
put out a
that.
video. Somebody put out a video where they took the Solo movie and they put a DH Harrison Ford in there instead. Like they put it on Alden Ehrenreich's body, and it worked.
Yeah.
It was a little crude maybe, but it did work.
But it should be adequate to freeze Skywalker.
I knew it. I was wondering if you were gonna go there with it, but
oh man, well, it's funny because much like you, how you just watched Rise of Skywalker is funny, and apologies once again to the fans out here. This past weekend, I've been kind of laid up in the hospital, and while I was there, they've been showing a lot of these Star Wars movies. So I was just
man,
if I'm going to be in here, it's
let me
awesome.
Guess.
I get to watch Star Wars.
Was it on TNT?
Yep.
Yeah. TNT, they might as well just change their name to the Star Wars channel, because it's so funny, because I'll be flipping through channels or whatever, and it's like, oh, what a shock. Star Wars, one of the films, Rogue One was on not too long ago, actually.
Yeah, they were doing the whole marathon, man. And like, it's funny, my dad caught it because he was like, yeah, I just watched Solo. And I was just, I was watching the original trilogy and then some of the sequels and stuff. And so it was cool for me too. So even once again, I forgot how good Harrison Ford it was to see him in Force Awakens, just like him playing Han Solo again. It was just like,
It
man, this
really
just feels
is.
so right.
Well, and
And that's why
another
I'm so
thing
happy for
too.
this.
Right. Right, because there's a couple of things. Even his role in The Rise of Skywalker, which was a total shocker. I remember, to me, it was everything that they could muster to get him back for episode 7, and they had to promise to kill his character. And
Mhm.
then it was the strength of JJ that brought him back for 9. Now, I don't think Colin Trevorrow would have actually had Han Solo in there at all, but if he had the idea, I'm not entirely sure that Harrison would have agreed to do it. Which is what's making this so surprising to me, is that even though he keeps having this almost distaste and I guess just grumpy old man syndrome when it comes to Star Wars, he does keep going back. And you bring up a good point with the Luke Skywalker thing, because I just thought about this not too long ago myself, is that you're right. Mark Hamill wasn't in it, but for maybe that one scene. But what a
Mhm.
pivotal, impactful scene that was.
Mhm.
And that's where I see maybe them placing a couple of Harrison Ford cameos, is in places to where it may only be, like a couple of minutes or whatever, but it'll be the talk of the entire series at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be almost like that moment when he shows up in 4 and he, you know, pops Vader's, little minion out the way, and it was just like no one, because like I remember as a kid watching that, I had no idea when that happened. I was just like, well, who the heck did that? And then you find out that you see the Millennium Falcon, you're just like, oh, sweet Han, right? So I
Yep.
mean, I could see them doing a scene like that, or something reminiscent of that. Him in the cockpit of the Falcon, where he does, you don't have to do too much with him. You can kind of just focus on his face or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also think too, though, I think I think where what maybe may have made Harrison Ford um want to return, a couple of things, thoughts I might have had. As you kind of get older, you kind of do start to realize, like, okay, you know, this is was a really cool thing that I did. Maybe throughout that point in time where he was doing Clear and Present Danger and all that stuff. Like he really wasn't trying to, get trapped into Star Wars. But now, it's like he's still doing another Indiana Jones movie. He's that's kind of unlisted right now.
Yeah, but that
But
he loves that character though. That's the
right, he
problem.
loves Indy. Right, he loves Indy because it's more vast to him.
Yeah.
But I think for Han though, I think that he sees what it does for fans. I think he understands what it does for the franchise. And I think when you start to have these young, and remember a lot of his issues were George. But see, with George being out of the picture now, you actually have competent people who are giving him depth and stuff for his character within the Star Wars universe, like a Filoni. Yeah, you kind of like, okay, you know what? I'll go to bat for this because,
Well, that's a good
this
point.
actually gives me this is giving me everything I need. I get to be a part of the Star Wars thing, something I started like, over 40 years ago. And then, but I'm still relevant. I can still have my character can still have some depth to him. And I get to work with these cool young directors who understand it, and they're actors, directors, by the way, too. So, that makes it a lot easier for him to want to come back to work.
Well, I would say that part of it is maybe I remember the convention when he finally attended that Star Wars celebration a couple of years ago. That
Hmm.
that sort of turned him around, because that was the first time that he ever interacted with a lot of the fans, and he was genuinely touched by it, and he understood that it's not. I think he had kind of that Trek convention thing going, where it's a bunch of
Hmm.
nerdy kids that
Nerds.
live in their mom's basement that are just, that he understood that no, these are doctors, lawyers, these are people that are, I mean, nothing against Trek fans, I'm one myself, but
Mhm.
that stigma that comes with that, though, I think that he was really genuinely surprised by, like, no, these people are actually normal. They're just really touched by this particular body of work. And he experienced that. Then, of course, you bring up another good point, too. You got Filoni now and Favreau that are sort of running this part of it. This isn't another film. It's not like Patty Jenkins tried to get him in Rogue Squadron or something, which, by the way, is back on,
Mhm.
apparently. That was
Mhm.
one of the stories that, we
Yeah,
were
we
going
were
to
juggling
cover.
around.
Yeah, I remember we were juggling that, and then we were gonna do like maybe an overall series update. I think that was where we last left it, and then this came out, and I'm like, all bets are off. We got to do this. But that's now in this. I have this graphic basically as the Book of Boba Fett because of the two series that he could pop up in. That makes the most sense. On the other hand, I could see him being in The Mandalorian. So which series, if you were a betting man, would you say that he's going to be in? Or maybe it's both.
Well, I mean, honestly, I would say maybe both. But if I were a betting man, I would probably say Book of Boba Fett, just because it feels right. You know, their whole dynamic, you know, of and it makes sense because, like, you know, Return of the Jedi, you know, it's always that whole Boba Fett, where, like, he's freaking out, like he knows who Boba Fett is.
Well, yeah, I
You know,
mean, they were
everybody kind of
basically
knows.
like an arch nemesis thing, even in. And it's funny because, and this is something that did survive all of the iterations, I guess, where you had the stuff that Lucas was officially saying, yes, this is basically my story. And then, of course, what is now considered Legends, the old expanded universe, that wildly expanded the whole Boba Fett Han Solo relationship. And then, of course, you have what we're presented with now. But the Han Solo and the Boba Fett connection has been something that's existed all through. It wasn't like,
Mhm.
you know, Boba Fett got the bounty and he was the lead bounty hunter after Han and he was the one that basically got him. There's a history there. And then, of course,
Mhm.
him, you know, Han being Jabba's right hand smuggler, I think makes a big
Mhm.
difference too. And here's something that I was thinking about as well. And this is why I find it really interesting that the comics now are really emphasizing the whole Crimson Dawn thing and you know, they're trying to bring all this stuff in. One of the things I find absolutely fascinating is the fact that with this whole Han Solo connection, if you remember in episode 7, he had gone back to smuggling.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not I mean, the Book of Boba Fett takes place, I think, around the same time as The Mandalorian. Now, it could end up jumping around. We could get some flashbacks. We could, you know, get some other stuff
Sure.
like that. But it's basically taking place around that same time period, which is about 6 years after Return of the Jedi. We don't know when Han Solo went back to smuggling. He could actually be full blown back into smuggling by now, and it would make sense that he would run into Boba Fett at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's you know, the nature of these two are really cool because they're both great at what they do.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's one of the reasons why Boba Fett kind of loved the challenge of chasing after the Millennium Falcon and catching Han, because Han was always seemed to be like this kind of course he's this cocky, you know, guy, but he's good though. You know, like he's always, you know, delivered his stuff. He was, you know, really crafty and about his business. And so was Boba Fett. And I think that's what made these two kind of really a good pair going after each other's, because it's like, you know, it's a total like Tom and Jerry cat and mouse type thing.
Yeah, absolutely. They're kind of like a sort of rivals,
Like the
you know?
Yeah, you kind of need one needs the other almost in a way.
Yeah.
Um but I think moving forward though, when we start now, you know, post Return of the Jedi, now it seems like things are flipped, because when we last laughed, when we saw Han, you know, in Empire, you know, he was succumbed to the casing of being encased in carbonite, and you know now he's kind of at the mercy of Boba Fett, where you know he's kind of like, all right. And then of course, you know, you have the whole World of the Bounty Hunters comic series that kind of, you know, uh, talks about all the stuff that kind of goes in between Empire and Return of the Jedi. However, in Return of the Jedi, it's Boba Fett who now ends up in the precarious situation where now he's in the Sarlacc pit, right? Kind of knocked in by Han, you know.
Yeah.
So so it's kind of like a
And you
weird
know what?
payback. So you know, you see what I'm saying? So
I do, and
now,
I got to show this off. I'm wearing this shirt right now.
okay. Ah, yes,
I had to
sweet.
do it, man. I had to wear my Han Solo Carbonite shirt. I saw that. I don't remember where I saw it, but I saw it somewhere and I was like, okay, I have to wear it for this episode. But it is interesting because they're really, and I don't think that this is an accident. They are really hammering this whole era between Empire and Return of the Jedi to try to get all this backstory in to set it up for what we're eventually going to see in both the Book of Boba Fett and The Mandalorian. I'm
Well,
convinced of
yeah, and I
that.
think, well, yeah, definitely. But even going back to the whole dichotomy between these two, because now it's like, okay, well, now that they're both out, so now Boba Fett's out the Sarlacc pit, Han's free. How do they view each other now? You see what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
was it personal? Was it business? And it kind of reminds me of the scene from from the '89 Batman movie when they're in the chapel and he's like, oh, you threw me into that vat of acid, and that wasn't easy to get over. He was like, but you killed my parents. He's like, okay, well, I killed your parents, and I made you, you made me. He's like, this is childish, right? And this kind of like what this reminds me of is because it's like, okay, well, you trapped me and got me in carbonite, and then I got out of that. My friends helped me there, and you broke out, but you knocked me into the Sarlacc pit. Okay, well, that wasn't easy to get over either, but I got out of that. So now what? So what are we now? Like, are we now enemies? And it'll be interesting to see if they even team up.
Well,
Like, what if that happens?
if they follow through with what they would do in the Legends, the old expanded universe, they did eventually team up occasionally. It's like Boba Fett was never really a good guy in the sense of, okay, I'm going to fight for the New Republic or something like that. But they would hire him occasionally to do stuff.
Hmm.
And he kind of had this like sort of frenemy relationship with him, where
Hmm.
sometimes they were cool and sometimes they were at odds. It just depends on who hired Boba at that time.
Yeah.
But I mean, even if they found themselves on opposite sides, they would usually sort of try to help each other out or at least try to stay out of each other's way. I mean, they had kind of an uneasy alliance going. So it will be interesting to see if maybe they continue that through this. And I think that that's the reason why it's going to be really interesting to see which series he pops up in, or maybe both. Because I mean, I could see him maybe in The Mandalorian, but it would be a little bit less personal and a little bit less deep. It seems like he needs to be in the Book of Boba Fett if they're bringing him back at all.
Yeah, I mean, especially with Tatooine being what it is, the history that Tatooine has with Han, because that's where he met everybody in the first place. That's kind of what kind of made it kind of surreal because if you think about it, from Episode 4, that's where we run into Han in the first place. It is on Tatooine because he's doing some stuff for Jabba and he's
Yeah, he's like
taking care
Jabba's
of that
right
stuff.
hand guy. And I mean, I think that that can't be. If Boba Fett is truly taking over Jabba's thing, and we've seen a million times in the trailer, Jabba ruled by fear, I tend to rule by respect, and all this other stuff. If
Hmm.
if he's taken over Jabba's operation, it stands to reason. I mean, I guess it really just depends on where Han is at during this time period. Because again, it's like you said, I don't think they're going to make him a main character or anything like that, but he's going to have a
No,
pivotal role.
yeah, I could see something happening where something needs to be done. Let's just say because Boba Fett's taking over Jabba's place, and he's starting his own organization and doing whatever he needs to do. And there might be something that he needs that he only knows what one person who can really truly get it for him, and that'll be
Mm-hmm.
Han.
Yeah.
And now they're gonna have that moment where it's like, oh, so this is what you're doing now. It's like, yeah, so I got out of that pit and you knocked me in. Oh, well, hey, you froze me. Remember? I could just see it. I could just see it kind of playing out. You know, and
Well, it would be
uh,
nice to have a little bit of an epilogue between those two characters because,
yeah.
first of all, that was the problem with Return of the Jedi. After Empire Strikes Back and the promising start that they had, I mean, I had such high hopes, and it turned into like this slapstick comedy routine, and it was just such a letdown. You know, it was just such a
Mm.
complete letdown. And so it would be nice if they revisited these two characters and gave us, I mean, if not closure, at least a really good scene that had some meat to it, that had meaning to it, that would counteract in a way the silliness of the Return of the Jedi scenes.
Gotcha.
I mean, at
Yeah,
least
I
that's
mean,
what I'm thinking.
well, no, I mean, yeah, it's true. I mean, I think people really kind of want to see where they stand with each other, and like I said, I think some people, I can see Han probably taking things personal, but Boba's like, look, it's just a job, man. It's like you popped up, I got paid. It is what it is. You know how the game goes. It's not a personal issue for me. Now, the only personal issue that Boba was really had was with the Jedi, with, of course, Mace Windu.
Yeah,
But
exactly. See, I could see Boba having more of a problem with Luke than with Han at this point, because Luke's about to
right.
rebuild the Jedi Order.
Hmm.
Now, the thing, though, that I'm really somewhat curious about is how exactly they're going to fit Han in there. If, again, this part is speculation. There has been some reports that Harrison Ford, shot some scenes or whatever. We don't know. We're just guessing that it was for the Book of Boba Fett, and we're about to see that in a couple of weeks.
Hmm.
So, given that there's only a few episodes, what was there, like 8 or something? I keep losing track. Was this one 10 and maybe Obi-Wan was 8? I can never remember how many episodes are in this stupid thing. But it's probably around 8 or 10. We know it's no more than 10. That
Right.
we're absolutely,
that much we
yeah, that much are pretty certain, right? So the question becomes, where does Han fit into the general story based on what we've seen in the trailer?
Oh yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, I think that's kind of what happens. I think it's probably going to be some sort of, especially this is supposed to be a limited series.
Well, it was, but remember they did
Well, it
announce
was.
they were going to do a season 2. Now they're probably not going to. I mean, I think that another thing. I mean, not to get off on a tangent here, but another thing that I think is just astounding about this whole report and announcement or whatever is the fact that they're getting Harrison Ford to play Han Solo in a TV show. Like, this isn't a movie. And so it could be
Well, I think that's
recurring.
it could be, and I think that's cool for him because it still frees him up to do what he needs to do, whatever other projects he's working on. It doesn't stop him from doing Indiana Jones.
Well, that's true. There's a
And
lot less of a time commitment, I would imagine.
sure, yeah, and then it's like, he can kind of play literally his role and get out of there, and I think that's another reason why this is him, because he's at the point in his life, he doesn't want to be necessarily bogged down with all the Star Wars stuff and having to constantly be on set for that, but he can still lend his faculties to that and still and still go off and do all the work on the other projects that he really wants to work on.
Yeah, and I mean that's the big thing right there is the fact that it does give him a little bit more freedom than if he was doing the movies. Now again, even with a film, he might be on set for a few days or something, we don't know. But I think a lot of it has to do with, is this going to be a role that's going to continue? Is it a one and done thing? Where does this fit into this? Because we know that the overall storyline seems to be, we might see some flashbacks about when Boba Fett got out of the Sarlacc pit. We might see some of that stuff. We're definitely going to see him and Fennec Shan take on some bounty hunters to try to pretty much, he's already taken over, as we've seen, Jabba's operation, but now he has to establish it. And he's going to have some, what's the word? Confrontation, I guess, from some other characters. So we know that. So the question is, even though Han Solo is really a pivotal part of Boba Fett's life, career, whatever, where in that, though, I wonder, does he fit? And even if you want to do it like this, do you think he's going to come earlier in the series, the middle, season finale, kind of like a Mark Hamill?
I think it'll be more middle or season finale.
I can see the season finale.
Yeah, just because I think you need the stakes to be high enough to bring Han into the picture. You know.
Exactly. Right. Because the whole thing is, if you're going to bring him in, it's got to be something with some depth, something with some meat. Plus, you got to look at it like this. What is going to woo Harrison Ford to come back and do a silly little TV show about Boba Fett? That's what he would think. He probably doesn't even remember who Boba Fett is. Because, they're always making fun of the whole thing where, like every article would bring up how he just like had a meltdown over the Force Ghost question.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I get it.
So it's kind of like you gotta, and I mean, I guess the way that you approach it is almost the way that maybe JJ did, where it's like, look, we got the story going, and we really need the Han Solo character to bridge this to this, or to carry, from this scene to this scene, or whatever the case may be. I could see that. But it's got to be something, because you're not just going to get Harrison Ford to come back for what, I mean, you can, decorate it all with this whole, it's Disney Plus, it's a streaming thing. It's kind of like a 6-hour film. Look, bottom line, it's a TV show.
Right. Now, my question is, if he shows up in Mandalorian.
Yeah, that's something we need to talk about too.
That's what I mean, because see, Boba Fett is kind of an easy play, but Mandalorian, not so much. Because see, honestly, I would love to see him interact with Luke at some point, because we never got that.
I know. That would be the cool thing. But then again,
we got him and Leia, which was cool.
Yeah,
I mean, that was good to see, and I'm glad we got a chance to see that. But honestly, like,
well, I'll tell you something though. When I was watching The Rise of Skywalker last night, you remember that scene where they did the young Luke and young Leia thing? It was essentially a flashback.
Yeah,
I'd be fine with that. Give me that. In some ways, it's like when I was watching that, I was almost thinking to myself, I understand and love and respect what they did by allowing Carrie Fisher to appear as Leia in Episode 9 to basically bookend everything. There was a big part of me that was like, they really should have recast that role. They should have just recast her. It would have been heartbreaking, but I think that if they gave Leia a meatier role in Episode 9, people would have been able to hang with that. And that's the thing that I look at a lot of times, is when I'm seeing some of this stuff, especially what they're able to do with the de-aging thing. Yeah, you could put Harrison Ford in some of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see Harrison Ford interact with Luke. To me, because their relationship changed so much.
Yeah.
Like their dynamic, because he went from being this annoying like kid in A New Hope to almost like a brother of Return of the Jedi. And it's kind of like,
that's true.
And then they even had that one other little moment where it's like, okay, well, he had feelings for Leia, and he thought Luke and Leia had a thing, and it's like, no, it's not that. He's my brother. And
didn't seem to stop him in Episode 5, but that's all right.
That's why when she said he's my brother, that's why he had that look on his face, is because he remembered Episode 5 when she kissed him. He was like,
yeah, don't bring up the kiss.
Oh. So,
well, but here's the thing that I find interesting about that, right, is pretty much what you're saying to me too, because you do have that change from, say, 4 to 6. But then I sort of liken it to, if you look at the Luke Yoda relationship from Episode 5 to Episode 6, there's, even though it's one film, there's definitely a difference there. But then you look at it again in Episode 8, and it's completely different, because now it's essentially two grandmasters that are at equal level, that even though there was a former student-master relationship and Yoda still had something to teach Luke, he approached him differently. He approached
Mhm.
him with the respect of, listen, this guy is super powerful at this point. And I think a similar thing could be done with Han and Luke, whereas I guess this would be episode 6.5, right? Because it takes place in between 6 and 7. You could have that further development. You got Han and Luke in 4. Han and Luke in 5 was sort of like that bridge because Luke wasn't quite the annoying kid. They actually had more of that Obi-Wan Anakin relationship going because if you remember when they were interacting on Hoth,
Mhm.
it was kind of a, sort of a brotherly type of a thing, right? And then in episode 6, it was the same thing. It just got a little bit deeper. And so I
Yeah,
think that
he
you could
goes like,
explore more depth.
yeah, because in 5, he's like, it's getting darker. So he's like, yeah, and it's cold. He's like, yeah, my friends out there in it. Like, he had ownership. You saw the commitment
That's true
that
too,
Han
yeah.
had to Luke, and
Well, I was even talking about the whole scene when they were out on the Tauntauns together, sort of exploring, like at the very beginning of the movie. A
yeah.
lot of people forget
But I
about
mean,
that. But there
oh
was some
yeah, true.
serious interaction there.
Yeah, but I mean, I just felt like you really felt Han's like
Well,
passion for
yeah.
Luke
Yeah.
as a friend. Like, yeah,
Right.
my friends out there in it. Like he's like, I don't care what you're talking about. Like, I'm not leaving him.
Mhm.
And you only see that type of loyalty he's only really had with Chewie.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
you really
true.
don't see that. He doesn't even do that with Lando. And then
Well, that's actually a good point because if you really stop and think about it, when last we left, at the very end of episode 4, he was still about to bail on everybody and take his money. It wasn't
yeah,
until the very
he's like,
last scene that he turns around and, knocks
he's
the
like,
TIE
right, like,
fighters out or whatever. That it's like,
yeah, but even
okay, and then
before he even leaves though, he turns to Luke kind of chastises him about stuff.
yeah.
And then then Han comes like, look, man, may the force be with you. And he says something, and that's what was so pivotal because the whole time Han was kind of like, no, there's no all powerful force that controls people's destiny and all this crap. Like, he reiterated that in 7. He's like, I thought it was a bunch of mumbo jumbo,
Yeah.
but he's like,
That
but it's
still
true.
kills me, man. It's
All
like,
of
no,
it.
it's all true.
Like,
Everything. The whole thing. The Jedi,
everything.
like it's all true.
Yeah. And just to see
I've
and
seen
the
some
fact that
stuff.
and the fact that he even put his own son in Luke's hands to train him, so like, well, look, you're the only
Well,
person who can
I
do this.
mean, yeah,
I mean,
exactly. He didn't know what to do with them. I mean, because if you think about it, by this time, he's seen Vader. He's seen, what Palpatine. I mean, he's seen all this stuff where it's like, whoa, this is like another whole thing that's happening above my head here. I don't know what to do with this.
well,
My wife's got
especially
these powers now that are weird. It's like, what have I gotten myself into? Is there anybody normal here?
yeah, my father-in-law was trying to kill me. It's just
Exactly.
like,
Right. I mean, because this is the thing that's really interesting. And I've thought this ever since Return of the Jedi came out because Luke tells Leia, I mean,
mhm,
kind of hate to break this to you, but Vader's your dad, right? But the one moment we never
our
get to
dad,
see, we never get to see Han finding that out.
right?
I mean, they do
Well,
cover
it's
it a little bit in Legends, and I think in Bloodline, because that was when the big secret came out and it basically destroyed Leia's career and all that, phenomenal book.
mhm.
They did deal with it a little bit there, and that is a canon book. But it just would have been great to see that on the screen, though, because, yeah,
Mhm.
all of the
Well, no,
interactions that Han had, especially the whole torture thing and everything on Bespin.
yeah. Well, that was my whole thing. It's like, he definitely believed him when he tried to shoot Vader and he blocked it with his hand,
Right,
and then he took his gun from him. It's
right.
like, oh, yeah, the force
It's
isn't
like,
real, huh? I'm like, all
okay.
right,
It's there's some things going on. And then of course later on, now he's dealing with Snoke and all this other stuff. So it's just like,
yep,
yeah, now he's
yep,
at the point by episode 7, like, yeah, okay, I get this now. This is
yeah,
real.
exactly.
This is
Yeah, this is
not,
real.
all this stuff is
And he,
happening above my head here,
And you gotta wonder, like, the things he's seen Luke do post Return of the Jedi. See, that's the other stuff, and that's why I wonder how this fits in Mandalorian season 3, because I would love to see him regroup with Luke and actually kind of like maybe do some stuff together. And now we get to see like, okay, what that was like, and maybe Luke trying to explain some things to Han, and just everything, because
I know, and that's the thing that
that
to
would be
me is
really I
always
really want to
missing.
see.
That's what
And see,
everybody wants to see.
And I see,
Because you
I
see
think we
the
have an
end.
opportunity here to do it, though. We have an opportunity to do that, though, because it's like, see, you have Alden Ehrenreich, who played a young Han.
Mhm.
Okay, you can get him. Han Solo. Harrison Ford is still willing to play Han Solo, so you just have him de-aged and just do the voice, you know. And then you got Mark Hamill get Sebastian Stan to play the young Luke Skywalker, or that guy that they used, whatever, and then put the face on him, and then actually have them do like at least like a little mini, even like I said, a limited run series if you
I
want.
would be all for
I
this
would totally go about that.
simply because the technology keeps getting better as the years go on, and I mean, it's pretty much a year by year thing that this thing is getting better and better and better. So
Hmm.
yeah, I'd be all for that. And I think that they should do that and they can do that. And again, this goes into what I've been saying. They're doing they're softly rebooting the sequel trilogy. You just don't realize it yet. And I think that that's going to start to really become obvious the more that they expand all this stuff that's going on. I mean, right now they're doing some serious world building right around that between Empire and Return of the Jedi, and then let's just say between Return of the Jedi and The Mandalorian, because you also have Ahsoka news that's coming out constantly. And one of the
Hmm.
things that I remember that came out not too long ago was that they're going to have Darth Vader in it somehow because Hayden Christensen's going to be in Ahsoka.
Hmm.
Of course, that has to be flashbacks, but
Right.
you could tell that they're trying to do some serious filling in the gaps, world building, character development, and all this stuff within this time period. And to me, it's critical to get the original actors to do it as long as you could get the de-aging thing to work correctly and these guys are willing to do it. That would
Absolutely.
actually fix the disappointment that everybody had with the sequel trilogy, because if you think about it, the way that episodes 6 and 7 sort of play out is the same to me as 2 and 3. In 2 you see the beginning of the Clone Wars, and then in 3 you see the very end. You got this bookend thing, but there's so much that can happen in the middle. And that's what everybody really wanted to see.
Hmm.
The only thing that saved it, that makes it a little different, is it's kind of the end of the Clone Wars, but it's also that pivotal thing to where the Empire's starting, and you clearly see that. And you get all this cool stuff with Palpatine and Anakin, and you see their relationship a lot more, and that's when everybody was interested. Now, I don't really care when, he's a little kid or something. I really want to see Palpatine interact with Anakin when he's about to go all Vader on everybody.
Right.
And that's the problem I see with 6 and 7, and primarily because there's so much time between the two. Is that by the time you catch up with the original characters, it's like, well, they're like these old fossils that are basically going to pass it on to, the
Yeah.
the next generation. It's like they're kind of winding down their adventure. They're there to be the more sage type of character to guide the next generation. It's like, no, we don't want to see that. We want to see
Yeah. We
these
want to.
guys go on another adventure together.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, like I said, I think that we as fans kind of want that. And of course, like I said, the cards didn't play out that way. But I think with technology, the way it is advanced now, I mean, you can kind of create
That's
those
it.
moments.
That's what's happening. And I think that that's exactly what they're doing. They're basically going, okay, we could still do this. I mean, unfortunately,
Hmm.
Carrie Fisher's not with us, but this is going to sound really bad, but you really don't need the Leia character per se. She was fleshed out enough, I think, that you can work around her. And you can always,
True.
I mean,
And if you
depending
need her, I
on,
mean, I mean, quite frankly, if you need it, just use her daughter.
Yeah, use her daughter, or depending on, I know there's a whole ethics thing behind it, but you could sort of pull what they did in Rogue One and do
Well,
a
that's
whole
what I'm saying.
digital thing,
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like you can use her daughter and just do a digital swap of her face. I
Yeah,
mean, it's her mom, so
yeah, yeah, and they
and I'm sure
might
she
go for
can.
that,
And that's what I'm saying. Like it's still literally keeping it in the family, So it's
pretty much. Or they could even
so I
just
think.
recast her. They could just have Billy Lord play her, I mean, it's
Mhm.
I get it. Or you just avoid it, right? She doesn't necessarily have to be at some of these pivotal moments.
Or just have someone who could do a really good voice impression of her. Have her come across some comm links like, "Han, we need blah 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 blah. All
Yeah,
right,
right.
Leia."
And you just like do the whole hologram thing too,
Yep,
you
exactly.
know.
Just kind of do those type of things, and you can keep her story going, or her presence is part of the story without
Hey man,
actually
my
having
thing
her
is
dead.
if you could bring back Tarkin and make him like an actual character all these years later, I mean, really, there's not really, you could just, again, I get it. There's like an ethical debate going on about, do we just pretty much bring up all these dead actors and resurrect them digitally, and, they don't really have control over it. It's not like Peter Cushing could say, I'm really not happy with the way this movie is or whatever. It's like, nope, we're just putting you in this thing. But
All right.
it's Star Wars. These guys know that, and I get it. It opens a door, and that's definitely probably a topic for another show, actually. But there are ways around it. There are ways
I agree.
around them getting around the whole Princess Leia thing. We'll just have to see what they do. But I'm
Absolutely.
really curious on this whole Harrison Ford thing. I mean, this really piqued my interest. And the good thing is, we really don't have that long to wait, at least for the Book of Boba Fett.
Right.
So if he doesn't end up popping up in the Book of Boba Fett, although I have a feeling that if he's going to be in any of the series, if it's an either or situation, I'm definitely going with that one.
Definitely.
But obviously, if he is, it's not quite the same crazy secret that the whole Mark Hamill thing was.
Right.
Because I mean that was just like that just
Yeah, that was out
blew
of this.
everybody out.
Yeah,
I mean that was just
totally.
incredibly epic and so cool. But the question becomes, what do you guys think? What do you guys think of this whole thing? First of all, do you even think it's true? Do you think that we're going to see Harrison Ford once again as Han Solo, de-aged in either the Book of Boba Fett or The Mandalorian? Next question, of course, which leave in the comment section, is which series? Which series do you think he's going to be in? Do you think he's going to be in the Book of Boba Fett or The Mandalorian? Make your case in the comments below. Maybe you think he's going to be in both of them. But either way, while you're at it, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Because the more times you guys hit those buttons, the more opportunities we have to bring you more Star Wars discussion. So I think that's going to wrap it up for today's show. But be sure to watch us Monday night at 8 o'clock. I promise you we're going to review Visions Episode 8. We only have 2 more episodes, which, of course, Daryl's probably saying, thank goodness. Yes, 2 more
Yes.
episodes. And you know what? So let me think. So this Monday is going to be, like the 21st or something? And then the following...
Monday. No, the Wednesday is the 22nd. Tuesday
Oh,
is
is
the
it?
21st. Yeah.
So Monday is the 20th.
Yep.
Okay. So we got the 20th. And then... So yeah.
Christmas Eve is the 24th.
So it looks like these next 2 Visions reviews, it's going to go right up against the whole Book of Boba Fett. Like, literally, we'll do episode 9 of Visions. The following Monday, episode 1 of the Book of Boba Fett. So we have that to look forward to. So until Monday night, we'll see you guys. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.